fact, let me take you to anchor, SABC News anchor Ayanda Nyati, who is on standby somewhere. Ayanda, where do we find you? Earlier on, you were basking in the glorious African sun. I don't imagine you to still be doing that because it is quite hot now.
Absolutely, Tulas. Winners know when to stop. So we're running around, but in a very different environment. I'm still just a stone throw away from you. In fact, just over your shoulder. If you look, you might be able to wave.
Enjoy your
But we're
stay.
still making sense, of course, of what we've learned so far about this adoption of this declaration, we're told, by an overwhelming consensus. And for that, let's bring in our analyst, Sunil Geness, who's been with us really from the beginning of our broadcast, it feels, and is with us once again. Great to see you once again. It's a big moment, I suppose, and we're still taking this in, even though we don't really have sight of what this document actually says. I wonder how much of what the president, though, said in his opening address is a good sign.
It's a tremendous sign because we've been listening into the heads of state and representatives of government speaking here today, and all of them are singing from the same hymn sheet, which means that the declaration that has been put together, it resonates with the country's development objectives and the greatest global south. Now, if we look further than that, when we compare the report that was mentioned earlier on this morning, the expert report led by former Minister Trevor Manuel, we understand that finance is a key aspect, and that will remain as a centerpiece to ensure that Africa gets its rightful place. The Russian delegate made mention of the fact that Ukraine in the last 3 years received more funding than the entire continent of Africa. And that tells you the degree of inequity we're having. Earlier on, we had a chance to engage with Minister Lamola, and he once again pointed out that artificial intelligence, it tops the list of conversation pieces. We know that Africa has less than 1% of data centers globally. That'll be something that we need to look into. The frameworks that are currently in place should favor Africans. At the moment, most of the regulatory frameworks that we have are developed in the global north, and we need to take into account the idiosyncrasies of the African countries as we move ahead.
Yeah, I know, of course, there's speculations going to go into overdrive about how long this document is, and we have seen in the past about, I think the one in India was pretty long, around 37 pages or so. Given just how widespread the areas of focus were, are you anticipating a long declaration?
I'm expecting a succinct declaration with some addendums eventually that will result in this. We mustn't forget that we have an Africa engagement framework that was agreed upon by finance ministers not long ago in October, which talks about a 5-year plan about investing in Africa. And this engagement framework has to be tied with the declaration. And that tells you that this G20 presidency has at least 5 years of legs on it in terms of fulfilling the mandate and the objectives. Another aspect that we should be mindful of is that India, Brazil, and prior to India, Indonesia, and Saudi Arabia, the concepts and the principles, the central tenets have been there. India with its digital public infrastructure, Brazil with bringing in the social summit, which we've seen widely recognized and was more inclusionary. And despite the non-attendance of some countries, this has been by far the most inclusionary G20 presidency.
Yeah, in fact, South Africa has been criticized at some stage. President Cyril Ramaphosa, really taking that on the chin, saying it could be a G1 million if it needs to be, as long as it's inclusive. Help us, I suppose, kind of place what we should be looking out for now. We know that there's still that closed session that's taking place. We know there's been a declaration. We don't know what's on the declaration. Many people are wondering, how do we build from this momentum? There's a lot of optimism, it feels, around this gathering so far, and we all know where it's headed next.
Absolutely, Ayanda. Most of us have been in a performance management review. The performance management review is not a result of one day's work. So we've had work done by the various task forces that have been there. The B20 has been active in this process. We've seen the global participation of leaders in the B20. And as a leader, we will not see anything that's radically different from the reports that have been presented and aggregated. And that B20 report from the private sector was also presented to President Ramaphosa recently. And all of this is a result of a culmination of 12 months of work, but building on platforms from our BRICS nations as well, India and Brazil, in this process. Overall, I'm sure the expert panel group recommendations, and there's sort of 10 key recommendations. I'm not going to go through each one, but the issues of finance, multilateralism, development banks making finance more available, setting up processes that encourage the African Free Trade Accord to move forward, because that has an impact with trading with the European Union and of course other parts of the globe as well. So we're going to see something which is complementary. The French president has made his remarks yesterday on landing, and he spoke about the fact that Africa being left out of global geopolitics is something which should not be happening. And that was a strong statement from him on his part as well.
Absolutely. Always a pleasure, Sunil Geness. Really appreciate the time as we continue mapping away around what we've heard so far and, of course, what we're still waiting to hear in a context where it feels like there is a shift taking place. I mean, we're hearing about this consensus around the declaration in the absence of the United States. I think that's certainly going to set tongues wagging for some time, and we'll certainly keep a very close eye on developments live to you from the Nasrec Expo Center. Let me bring your attention, by the way, to the action we're still watching for you outside of this venue. You might have seen earlier visuals of a protest that had been taking place. We're beaming to you our live picture at the moment, where you can see there's been a bit of a standoff with some of the protesters who obviously are hoping to use this opportunity to make their own voices heard. There's been all manner of, I suppose, feedback or commentary about whether or not they're going about this in the right ways. Operation Tudula seems to be leading that particular operation, with police keeping a very close eye on those developments. The SABC News team live throughout the course of the day as we continue our rolling coverage of G20 2025. We'll be right back.